Well, first of all, we wanted to update the public. We're here with the family of Sylvester Stewart, along with Dr. Beasley. We have his mother here. We have aunts and uncles. Bobby McMurray, who you'll hear from a little later, who has the power of attorney as it relates to this family. Me and Dr. Beasley, just some quick history. We were recruited, so to speak, by this family, specifically Ms. McMurray, in Atlanta, Georgia. We understand that this tragedy hit Sylvester and this family last month. We're here standing in front of the GBI headquarters here in Thompson. This took place in Crawfordville, but right now the governing investigating agency is the GBI. Very quickly, we understand that this particular case has gotten, I don't even want to say bare minimum media coverage, almost zero to none. What's being said, or what's been said so far, is that there was a gentleman hit and killed by a train on the track. We think it goes much deeper than that. The rabbit hole goes much deeper than that. We came here to not only for the family to meet the individuals that are investigating the death of their loved one. We came here to highlight some inconsistencies and red flags leading up to Sylvester even getting on that track. Number one, there were conflicting accounts from local PDs here. Taliaferro County PD approached this family and stated that Sylvester was basically wanted for an act that we're not disputing, but also that he assaulted an officer and fled. Later that next day, Sylvester's lifeless body was found. This family went to Greene County PD and basically came up empty-handed, left their information, and we understand that the sheriff scheduled a meeting with this family. Well, at that meeting, in our possession, we have dash cam and body cam video that totally dispute the Taliaferro County PD's claims of what happened. Again, we aren't disputing the act in which why they were called, but there was absolutely, positively, 100% no assault on officers. We have footage showing that the last time that Sylvester was seen alive was when he pulled off, eluding arrest. Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear again. We're not condoning any of the wrongdoing that Sylvester is allegedly responsible for. But wrongdoing doesn't mean that you're found lifeless, face down on top of the railroad tracks. I want to make sure that's clear. This mother, when she was approached, or the grandmother, excuse me, when she was approached, telling her about the lewd acts, telling her about the assault, we find it strange that when Sylvester's car was discovered the following morning, which would have been October 4th, we find it highly suspicious and strange that the grandmother of this family wasn't contacted to let the family know that we have recovered the vehicle of this individual that's on the run. That is a question that we posed here to the GBI. There was no answer for that. And for the record, while it's under investigation, there's going to be limited amount that they can give us. But even within that limited amount of information that they can give us, there was no answer for that. This was around 4 a.m. It's our understanding, and it was confirmed, that give or take, Sylvester's lifeless body was found about a mile down the road on the track after 4 a.m. Well, it wasn't until around 1:30-ish, I think they even have in the report 2 p.m. documented, that Sylvester's lifeless body was found. Maybe things are just done differently here than they are in Atlanta and any other city. Because one of the major questions was, how do you find the vehicle that he was in that you're looking for at 4 a.m., not notify the family, one, but then it takes you 9+ hours to find a body that is a mile up the road? There was no answer for that. Matter of fact, I'll be quite honest, there was an answer of opinion for that, is that, you know, the county just didn't look for the occupant of the vehicle. Makes no sense. Um, the autopsy report is not in yet. The toxicology report is not in yet. I want to make sure we're clear. We understand that local PD announced before it even got to the GBI that Sylvester was struck and killed by a train. Well, there's no way to technically know that, and the autopsy's not been done. You know, you can assume, but I don't think it was printed as an assumption. This family is prepared to exhume the remains of Sylvester, if need be, to provide our own evidence as far as our own autopsy. Again, I say this over and over again, I want to make it clear. We do not have the autopsy reports. The autopsy reports might be supportive of what our theory is saying. So we want the public to know, and very briefly you'll hear from one of the family members, there are several scenarios that could play out here. We know the historical nature when it comes to black folk, African American folk, African folk, historically being laid out on tracks, historically being mutilated, historically being dismembered. We also know that there's a history of folks putting our folks on tracks to cover their own tracks. So no matter what, let me be careful. The main point of this story right now is, was Sylvester hit by the train? I want people to think a little bit deeper than that. I want you to think about the accounts that led up to him even getting to where he is. I want you to think about some of the lackluster policing that takes place down there in those parts by the way of Taliaferro County PD and their sheriff. That is why we are calling for a rally come next Saturday. The location is to be announced, but we know it will be around 11 in the afternoon. This rally is not just to show that Sylvester was a human being. He wasn't a dog, he wasn't a deer, he wasn't some kind of game that just happened to cross the railroad tracks. You know, this is a person with family and supporters. We want those supporters, the extension of the family, to come out, because as it stands right now, we need more information. We can sit back and allow the GBI and other agencies to do their investigations, but we also can do something ourselves. We can go out and we can contact people that were in the area. We know in today's age, even in this, excuse me for saying it, this small town of the world, there are cameras all over this place. We need more information. So before the questions and before Ms. Murray speaks, again, for clarity, the last people to see him alive were the police that approached him and he fled. Fleeing is not a death sentence, okay? We understand that that area was blocked off all evening by PD, and ironically that morning, that following morning, they find Sylvester's pickup truck abandoned. That's about 4 a.m. No communication to the grandmother, to the family, even though the day prior you came to this lady's house to tell her about the act he was involved in and falsely stating that he assaulted an officer. And remember, we have video totally disputing that. The other main point, if his vehicle was found at 4 a.m., why did it take 9+ hours to find a dead body from an abandoned vehicle that you were searching for? Why did it take 9 hours? We feel like the time that Sylvester fled to the time that he was found is some inconsistencies with the investigation. There's some inconsistencies with the investigation. We know before we have had our people's bodies lacklusterly handled. We know that flat out just not even investigated. And it appeared to be that this was swept under the rug. It was stamped, not by this particular press, but it was stamped by the press by way of the local PD that you had this accident that just happened to result in Sylvester Stewart's death. We have photos. There were many people that were on the scene. There's also question about the contamination of the crime scene. We understand that at least one individual was allowed by way of the local sheriff to actually enter the crime scene. More specifically stated, the crime tape used to rope off those areas was even held up like a wrestler entering the ring, given free rein to go into a crime scene. For clarity, again, we understand that this stuff took place before the GBI came on board, but it's the GBI's responsibility to investigate the entire case of Sylvester Stewart, not just if he was tapped by that train. So we want to make it clear. We feel like Sylvester, based on his history, based on the act that he was that the police were notified for and that he was going to be arrested for, we believe that those two factors played a big role into what could possibly be Sylvester was met with foul play and was laid on those tracks to cover it up.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for their prayers for the family. And if anyone have any information they can share with us, please do so. And as far as the rally is concerned, we will be having one on the 24th, that Saturday at around 11 a.m. The location, I will get with everyone and let them know for sure of the location. Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Can you state your first name, last name as well?
Bobby McMurray.
Spell it.
BOBBIE MC MURRAY.
And what is your relation?
My nephew, he's my nephew.
Okay,
Her son.
thank you. You got anything else you want to continue at, or we can ask questions?
Oh, no, questions. Take questions.
Okay, so Ms. Coleman, you were recruited from Atlanta to come down to Augusta. You gave us a great presser, foul play. There's inconsistencies, as you say. Rally's coming up next Saturday, but what's next? Because you guys want the information, so what is next that you want to know?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as we stated in there, we're waiting on the autopsy report. I mean, that's key here. I mean, and of course, with the autopsy report comes the toxicology report. But listen, I'm just going to say it in front of the press, in front of this family. Sylvester is the type that they're going to smear. I'm not saying you guys personally, but, you know, his history, they're going to smear. I want to make sure we're clear. I don't care if Sylvester was the worst human being in this world, which I have no clue if he was or he wasn't. That does not give any indication why we holding Sylvester Stewart signs out here. You know, having a bad record is not a death sentence. So the autopsy report is so crucial. But, you know, like I stated earlier, well, I didn't state this earlier. This is not my first rodeo. And, you know, autopsy reports normally, in many cases, confirm what's already being said. But in a number of cases, I have been with families that have exhumed their loved ones' remains, and that autopsy conflict the first. So we're prepared for whatever the autopsy report reads, but make no mistake about it, that's a crucial piece of information here. I do want to reiterate, though, and again, this is deal with the local PD before the GBI got on board. But there's reports that are given. I mean, that's the way this works. They're given a report, and then they do their investigating. There's no explanation for the 9+ hours that his body laid a mile down the road. There's no explanation for the family being notified after the incident, but once Sylvester's truck was found, no informant of the family. These are questions that not only raise concern, but it causes the family extra grieving. There is another point here. We were able to give information because a couple of days after Sylvester's body was found, after this family went around trying to get answers, a local law enforcement officer came and gave his condolences. And not only just his condolences, he also said that today was his last day. He was putting in his resignation. These are things that highlights, you know, foul play to the family. There was no relationship with this former law enforcement officer. We don't know what made him, you know, what moved him to send his condolences. We don't know what moved him to resign. But we sure know something don't smell right that it happened on the heels of this man found on the track.
I guess the next thing is that Black Lives Matter. That's the message. And what is happening in a small town like Thompson, that we will respond all over the world. Black lives indeed matter.
Can you tell me what agency that officers from that came to give condolences to the family?
Tallahassee County. You know, listen, most of our concerns, the falsification of assaulting an officer is Tallahassee. The approaching, I'm sorry, that's when they approached this grandmother, you know, to explain what had happened with Sylvester at a local convenience store. And then the falsification of assaulting a police officer. Listen, hey, we've seen incidents with little children in small towns whistle at certain individuals and get drugged, beat, drowned, and put on display, thankful to his mother for letting the world see what they did to her baby. And I'm speaking Emmett Till. Now, I'm not trying to compare Emmett Till and Sylvester, but what I am trying to compare is it doesn't sit well in a small town in Georgia, an individual that is being apprehended for indecent exposure in this small town, who alludes wrongdoing, we admit, but then he found up dead. And for clarity, we want to make sure you understand that even though Sylvester was found face down, the images that we have, Sylvester's nose is unrecognizable. I mean, pushed into his skull, to put it lightly. There are injuries, and again, we'll release these photos, but it's not just, was he hit by the train or was he not? There is damage on this man's body after what we know was a tense moment, you know, in this small town, with a man with a checkered past. Not to mention his whereabouts from the afternoon of the 3rd to the truck being found the morning of the 4th to 9 hours later, his body being found, and no one knows nothing. And then the local sheriff gets on the news and say, hey, hit by a train, and it's reported 1-2-line sentence, man dies. His family deserves more than that. Sylvester deserves more than that. Human beings, period, deserve more than that. So for the record, we had a decent meeting. You know, they're limited to what they could share. They did share some things, but it was the things that they were unable to answer that point to the local county PD, which is the reason why we're coming next Saturday in that area to really highlight some of the crazy activity, not just with Sylvester, but that's going on with this sheriff.
Let me ask a question for the family. Anybody can step in. After hearing that Sylvester got hit by a train and police officers said hit by a train, that's it, what made you guys feel like something didn't smell right? You know, because you had to come out and pretty much get the pieces. You can jump back in if you want to.
Yeah,
but I wanted to see what the family wanted.
I mean, man, listen. This has a stench of the old days of South Georgia. And, you know, I can say the old days, and I don't like to cross families and cases that I work on, but, you know, I don't even like to say old days, Dr. Beasley, because just a couple of years ago down in Valdosta, we've got a young man who I work very closely with his family named Kendrick Johnson found dead inside of a wrestling mat. So the tactics of old, you know, still apply today. So railroad tracks, not to mention the condition that Sylvester is in on those railroad tracks. Not to mention the fact, remember, Tallahassee County gave this family play-by-play. Came to the house and said, hey, we're looking for him. So of course, you know, he's missing. He's not just missing. Imagine a black family knowing that the police are looking for your loved one who's done this act. They were worried and concerned. So when they found out he was on the tracks and was hit by a train, I mean, you know, I think the natural reaction was to be, wait a minute, something isn't right here. And then you tie in, again, I keep reiterating this, you tie in the vehicle being found, no notification of the family, 9 hours later. I'll be quite honest, even though this was his opinion, what was said today was Tallahassee County probably didn't look for the body.
That's what GBI said?
Yeah, but now, you know, in all fairness, this is their opinion, but I couldn't understand for the life of me, like I said, maybe things are done differently out this way. The man was wanted. He was wanted because he eluded the officers for an arrest. So if you find the vehicle of the driver, if you find the vehicle of the person that you're looking for, why would you not look for the person? And then why would it take nine plus hours later? There are some serious questions that need to be asked on behalf of Taliaferro County, the way that they handled this investigation and his body before the GBI got involved.
And that's what pretty much the rally's going to take place.
The rally is taking place just for that, to highlight some of the inconsistencies, but to flush out anyone that possibly has any. And look, there's no information that's too small, especially when you have so many unknowns. We know that Sylvester's truck was riding on the rim when it was found. Obviously a blowout. What caused that? Could be something, could be nothing. Could be nothing, could be everything. But again, we got involved, myself and Dr. Beasley, just because there were too many unanswered questions, and it had a stench too much of the older days. At the very, very least, the family deserves a thorough investigation and let the chips fall where they may.
This is my last question for you, Mr. Coleman. You want to jump in?
Go ahead.
You're from Atlanta, right?
Yes, sir.
Augusta is a small town.
Yes, sir.
What-
Crawfordville's even smaller, I guess.
Taliaferro is even smaller, but what made you feel like it was important for you? You heard this family out. What made you feel like it was important for you to drive 2.5 hours down here to get the answers, get the questions they need, and get the justice for this family?
So I appreciate that, but I've been all over the country. You know, this is just what my life's calling is. And again, you know, I operated in the same vein for the family of Kendrick Johnson, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson down in Valdosta, still fighting, even though it went all the way to the homicide division of the U.S. Department of Justice. This reminded me of that. Sadly to say, the results of that were not positive, and Kendrick was found in a wrestling mat inside of a high school gymnasium. Here we've got Sylvester on the tracks laying by his lonesome. You know, it's a deeper rabbit hole here. But again, what I'm really a stickler on are just the events leading up to finding him. I'll tell you what I told the GBI in there today. Hypothetically speaking, if he was hit by a train, that's not the end of story. It's our position that another scenario could have existed because of what he did earlier that day. He was met with foul play and then put on them tracks to cover the tracks. So even if he was hit by a train, as far as when their autopsy results come out, we still are going to perform our own, but we still believe the lapse in accountability by way of law enforcement with this investigation will point to foul play, and there could be a scenario of being hit by a train, but also there be an issue as well, and that's our position.
Do you happen to know when the autopsy results are expected?
Good question. Normally, when I get involved with the family, it's right when it happens. Ironically, you know, no one heard about this all the way up in Atlanta. It wasn't for the persistence of this family and Ms. McMurray, Ms. McMurray being the family, we still wouldn't know. So, any day now, to answer your question, I mean, we've got, you know, going 5 weeks plus now. You know, we know things take time, you know, but we are approaching the time that autopsy report should be complete. That's what we're currently waiting on. As soon as those results are provided, then we'll know if we need to go left or if we need to go right. We're prepared to go either way. Because again, our thing is, if it says he was hit by a train, that does not mean, oh, okay, case closed. No, sir. The damage of Sylvester laying on his front side, the damage to his front side, he's got damage on the back, and the events that took place with law enforcement and the absolute falsification of assaulting law enforcement. We all know that law enforcement is a problem here in this country. There are folks that say that there's good law enforcement out there. I know some, but I would beg to differ if I would be willing to say that they are good because they know too many bad apples on their force. So you can't be a righteous officer and not cross that cold blue line of silence that they keep all the time. You can't chastise and condemn a group of individuals who like to say we have a no snitching policy, but the cold blue line of silence is an even better no snitching policy. You know, which is why we think that man's conscience moved him enough to come visit this mother, grandmother, give his condolences, and share that he's no longer going to be on the force. Again, could be nothing, could be everything. So life's work brought me here. We're waiting on the results. And we just really need the community. We say it so much. We need the community. I mean, you know, you got one of your own laying out here on these tracks. You got a family, you know, that's rooted here. You know, all of the things that I'm finding out outside of Sylvester, of what goes on with this sheriff in this county, y'all know something's not right. It's my understanding that black and white all together know something isn't right here. The only way this thing's change is if you speak up. We want to make sure we let folks know you can anonymously give some information, or if you come to this rally next Saturday, you know, we'll have rooms for you to privately give this information. Wrapping it all up again with the inconsistencies I spoke about, the family, Sylvester, deserves more of a thorough investigation, and we see now that if it wasn't for our involvement, you guys wouldn't be here, and rightfully so, because it was stamped what it is, and that was going to be the end of it. But we're here to let you know, them days is over. Whether we got to drive 2 hours, whether we got to jump on a train, or hate to use that reference, or a plane, you know, there are people that are in positions. This ain't the 60s, this ain't the 40s, this ain't the 30s. You know, we have people in places that can combat police when it comes to investigations. And that's what we feel like we've done here today. So we'll definitely let you guys know when these autopsy results come in. And if they do not support our theories, then we're prepared to continue until we get to the bottom of what happened to Sylvester Stone.